The Dragon King covered Marenna Dusk's ash starlings because black wings looked unlucky above a royal vow fire. The first veil dropped over the aviary before the Border Vow Rite horns finished their low bronze cry. It fell from the ceiling like mourning cloth, heavy and black, swallowing branch after branch of the vow aviary of Cindervale. Hundreds of tiny claws shifted inside the darkness. Soft wings fluttered. Small throats clicked in distress. The ash starlings did not scream. That made the court crueler. Creatures that suffered quietly were easier to call decoration. Marenna stood beneath the western cage arch, with her hands wrapped around the locking chain. She did not pull back. Two royal attendants pulled the veil down anyway. The chain burned against her palms as the first row of birds vanished from sight. A noblewoman near the vow dais sighed with relief. Better, the black was dreadful. Another whispered, "Imagine beginning a royal alliance beneath carrion wings." Marenna heard both. She always heard. People spoke freely around aviary keepers because they believed anyone who loved unwanted had already accepted being unwanted too. Vow scribe Ilric Mael stood beside the alliance vow fire with his ivory quill tucked behind one ear and a scroll of pure white dragonhide open in his hands. His robes were pale gold, clean at every hem. Not a single ash stain marked him. That alone made Marenna distrust his vows. "The court requires purity of sight," Ilric said, loud enough for the border brides to hear. "The ash starlings will remain covered until the rite is complete." Marenna looked at the restless black veil. "They are not omens." Ilric smiled without warmth. "Everything becomes an omen when kingdoms bind themselves before fire. Only when scribes need excuses." The words slipped out too sharp. The aviary went still. Beyond the open arch, the vow court of Cindervale glittered in firelight. Black basalt columns rose into a domed ceiling painted with dragons devouring stars. At the center burned the royal vow fire, a tall golden flame contained in a bronze bowl shaped like two dragon jaws. Around it stood the noble houses, the border brides, the priests, and the Dragon King's guards. At the far end of the hall, Dragon King Corven Dravik entered. The flame bent toward him. Not much. Enough for Marenna to notice. Corven was not beautiful in the courtly way. He was severe, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, and still as a blade laid across a throne. His black crown had no jewels. Only 7 thin dragon teeth rising like a warning. A scar ran from the edge of his jaw down into the collar of his ceremonial armor, pale against brown skin, old but not forgotten. His eyes passed over the veiled aviary, then Marenna. For one breath, she thought he saw the birds moving under the cloth. For one breath, she hoped that mattered. Ilric bowed. "Majesty, the aviary has been silenced as requested." Marenna's fingers tightened on the chain. "Covered," she said, "not silenced." Corvin's gaze returned to her. "You object?" His voice was low, controlled, not cruel. That made it worse. Cruel men announced themselves. Controlled men could call harm order. Marenna lifted her chin. "Ash starlings are living witnesses under old vow law." A ripple passed through the border brides. Ilric laughed softly. Old vow law also permitted blood, duels over dowry smoke. We are not bound to every superstition that nested in Cindervale before record-keeping improved. The birds remember vows spoken near dragonfire. They mimic sound. They keep what scribes remove. The court went quiet enough for the vow fire to crackle. Ilric's eyes sharpened. Corven noticed that too. Marenna saw him notice. But noticing was not protection. Ilric turned toward the king. "Majesty, the keeper has spent too many years among soot birds and half-burned branches. She mistakes noise for law." Marenna felt the insult land exactly where he wanted it. Not on her rank, not on her clothing, on what she loved. Small black birds. Ugly to the court. Precious to no one but her. Inside the veil, a starling tapped once against the cage bar, then twice. A vow rhythm. Marenna's heart tightened. Ilric heard it and raised one hand. "Begin the binding." "No," Marenna said. The word left her before fear could swallow it. Corvin's eyes darkened. "No? The birds must be uncovered before the vow fire rises." Ilric stepped between them. "Majesty, if the birds are exposed, half the border families will call this rite ill-fated. The alliance is already fragile." Marenna looked past him to the women standing in pale veils along the south side of the hall. Border brides, they called them, as if brides were bridges and not people. Their faces were composed, too composed. One had bruised fingers where she held her vow cord. Another stared at the fire with the hollow patience of someone already promised away. The alliance is fragile because some vows are missing, Marenna said. The vow fire snapped high. Corven's face changed. Barely. Ilric's did not. That was how Marenna knew. Corven looked at her fully now. What vows? Ilric answered first. No vows are missing. The official vow scroll has been prepared under royal seal. Then let the birds hear it. A few nobles hissed. Ilric's smile returned. The keeper asks that royal law be submitted to cage birds. Marenna looked at the black veil trembling over the aviary. I ask that living witnesses not be smothered, because truth has dark wings. Corven's jaw tightened. For one moment, he looked toward the border brides. One of them lowered her eyes too quickly. Marenna saw it. So did he. Then Ilric spoke softly, precisely. Majesty, a delayed rite will be read as weakness. A corrupted omen will be read as refusal. If this vow fire fails, the border houses may break from Cindervale before sunset. There it was. Fear dressed as ceremony. Corven looked at the golden fire, the waiting houses, the trembling brides, the covered aviary, and Marenna's hands still wrapped around the chain. Keep the aviary veiled, he said. The words did not shout. They did not need to. The second veil dropped. Then the third. Black cloth swallowed the last visible branch. The ash starlings disappeared completely, their tiny feet shifting in the dark. The court exhaled in relief. Marenna did not. She reached through the lower bars and touched the nearest perch, the one old birds used when remembering vows. Something small pressed its head against her finger from behind the veil. One small dignity, one last witness. The ash starlings did not choose queens. They did not bless brides. They did not curse kings. They kept the shape of vows spoken near dragonfire, which voice promised freely, which word was cut away, and which silence had been sown over a life before the fire could judge it. Ilric lifted the white vow scroll. The royal vow fire rose. Golden flame climbed higher than any flame should have climbed indoors. Inside the covered aviary, hundreds of black wings opened at once. Marenna looked up. Too late, Ilric heard them. The veil split from inside. Ash starlings burst through the black cloth like living cinders, small dark bodies streaked with gold fire. They flew straight into the royal vow flame. The court screamed. Corven stepped forward, one hand lifted to command the fire. But the birds did not burn. They passed through the golden flame and came out carrying words in their wings. Burning vow patterns spread above the court. One line formed in fire across the air. The release vows were removed before the border brides were brought to the fire. Ilric Mael went white. Corven looked from the burning birds to Marenna Dusk, standing beneath the torn black veil. His voice did not soften. What release vows were erased from my vow fire? Ilric Mael answered before the burning wing letters finished spreading above the vow fire. Old clauses, he said. The words sounded calm only because he had spent his life teaching ink to look innocent. Above the royal vow fire, the ash starlings circled in a storm of black wings and golden flame. They did not scream. They did not scatter. Each bird carried a fragment of burning shape along its feathers, and together those fragments formed the sentence the court could not unread. The release vows were removed before the border brides were brought to the fire. Dragon King Corven Dravik stood beneath it, one hand still lifted toward the flame he had failed to command. His face remained hard, but his eyes had changed. They no longer looked at the birds as ugly omens. They looked like witnesses. His voice did not soften. What release vows were erased from my vow fire? Ilric bowed. Ceremonial remnants, Majesty. Old border language from a harsher age. They are recited in rural houses for comfort, but they do not bind Crown Alliance law. Marenna Dusk stood beneath the torn black veil with ash dust in her hair and blood, warming her palms where the locking chain had burned skin. One starling landed on the cage arch above her, its small chest pulsing with firelight. She looked at Corven. Not gently. You ask because the fire embarrassed your scroll, she said, not because the birds were covered. His jaw tightened. He did not apologize. Good. She would not have believed him if he had. Corven looked from her to the white dragonhide scroll in Ilric's hands. "Read the missing clauses." Ilric's fingers tightened around the scroll. "Majesty, living birds cannot revise royal law." "No," Marenna said. "They remember what royal law heard before a scribe touched it." A border bride, near the south column, made a small sound. Ilric's gaze snapped toward her. Marenna saw fear close the woman's mouth. The ash starling above Marenna tapped once against the cage arch, then twice. A vow rhythm. Marenna lifted her hand slowly. "They are not ready to read all of it." Ilric laughed. "How fortunate." The birds accuse vaguely, then rest. Marenna did not look at him. "They carry pieces, not mercy." Corven's gaze sharpened. "What do you need?" She almost hated that question from him. Need had been standing under his roof with black cloth over its mouth. "The birds must be free of the veil before any vow is read," she said. "All of them." Ilric stepped forward. "Majesty, if the aviary is opened, those creatures will foul the vow fire and panic the border houses." Marenna looked at the torn cloth hanging from the upper branches. "The border houses are already panicked. They are only quieter than birds." Corven gave one order. "Remove the veil." No apology. No tenderness. But the order cut the cloth. Attendants hesitated, then pulled the black coverings down. The ash starlings emerged branch by branch. Small, soot, dark bodies, bright eyes, feathers rimmed with gold where they had flown through vow fire. They looked ugly to anyone who feared truth without polish. To Marenna, they looked alive. She touched the nearest perch. "Now," she said. The birds answered. Not with speech, with pattern. 3 starlings flew through the vow fire, circled the white dragonhide scroll, then broke apart above the court. Their wings left brief golden marks in the air. A loop, a line, a broken ring. Marenna read them carefully. Vow rhythm. The first mark pulsed. Border bride consent. The second mark appeared and vanished too quickly. Release clause. Ilric said, "Ceremonial." Marenna turned to him. "A vow without a way to refuse is not a vow. It is a cage with music." The south column went silent. The border brides heard her. Corven did too. His eyes moved to their bound cords, to their pale faces, to the way none of them looked at Ilric unless he looked away first. "Show the scroll," he said. Ilric did not obey quickly enough. Corven's guards stepped closer. The vow scribe unrolled the white dragonhide scroll before the fire. Black ink gleamed perfect and clean across its surface. Names of houses, names of brides, names of alliances, promises of loyalty, passage, defense, tribute, blood peace. Beautiful words. Too beautiful. Marenna pointed to the lower margin. "There," Ilric said. "There is nothing there. That is the point." The ash starlings circled lower. Their wings stirred the fire without burning. Golden sparks settled across the blank margin of the scroll. At first, nothing happened. Then a thin gray line appeared. A cut mark, not torn by age, not faded by smoke, scraped away by a scribe's blade. Corven's expression went colder. "What was removed?" Ilric bowed his head. "Duplicated language, redundant consent phrasing." Marenna looked at the birds. Again. The starling on the arch opened its wings. The whole aviary answered. Tiny black bodies flew through the vow fire and returned with burning fragments of words. Release, refusal, free passage, unbound, before signing, no alliance by force. The fragments did not form a full law. Not yet. The ash starlings did not solve everything. They carried what had been spoken near dragonfire and cut from ink. Marenna read the order as the wing patterns aligned. Release clause spoken before the scroll was sealed. Scribe, cut mark, placed over the margin. Border brides brought afterward. Signatures taken after removal. Ilric's face remained pale, but his voice stayed smooth. Old language was removed to prevent confusion. The brides signed the lawful scroll presented to them. Marenna turned toward the south column. Did they see the release clauses before they signed? No bride answered. That silence was answer enough. The vow fire bent low, and the ash starlings swept through it one more time. Their wings rode a clean, burning line across the air above the white dragonhide scroll. Release clauses cut before border brides signed the vow scroll. Ilric Mael went still. Corven looked from the cut margin to the women at the south column. His voice did not soften. Which brides signed after their refusal rites were removed? At the south column, no bride moved. That was worse than panic. Panic would have scattered. Panic would have made noise. Panic would have given the court something simple to condemn. The border brides stood beneath their pale veils, with their vow cords looped around their wrists, each woman trained by family, treaty, fear, or hunger to become still when powerful men began asking questions too late. Above the royal vow fire, ash starlings circled in small black flashes, their feathers rimmed with gold. The burning wing letters had faded from a full warning into fragments, but the fire still remembered the sentence. Release clauses cut before border brides signed the vow scroll. Dragon King Corven Dravik looked toward the south column. Which brides signed after their refusal rites were removed? Ilric Mael bowed before anyone could answer. Majesty, all brides signed the scroll presented under lawful witness. If old release phrasing was removed before signature, then no confusion touched the act of signing. Marenna Dusk looked at him. You call ignorance clean because you washed the knife before showing it. A few nobles drew sharp breaths. Corvin's gaze shifted to her. Not soft, not gentle. Attentive in the way fire became attentive when given oil. Which brides? He repeated. Marenna did not bow to the command. Her palms still burned where the chain had cut them, and ash dust clung to her sleeves. One starling perched near her shoulder, small claws gripping the torn veil. Its black eyes reflected the vow fire. You ask for names after letting him cover the witnesses, she said. Corvin's jaw tightened. He did not apologize. Good. Marenna would not have known what to do with an apology while the women at the south column still stood bound. Ilric lifted the white dragonhide scroll. Names are already recorded. Ink records what remains, Marenna said. Birds remember what was removed. The starling on her shoulder tapped once against the broken chain, then twice. A vow rhythm. Marenna turned to the border brides. If any of you heard, release words before signing. Let the birds carry them. No one spoke. Ilric smiled faintly. There is your answer. Marenna looked at the women's hands, not their mouths. The first bride, the one with bruised fingers, had wrapped her vow cord so tightly that the skin beneath it had gone white. The second kept her thumb pressed against the knot, as if stopping it from tightening further. The third had a burn mark beneath the silk, half hidden by ceremonial gold thread. Marenna's throat tightened. They cannot speak freely while the cords are live, she said. Corvin's eyes moved to the wrists. Live? Ilric's face cooled. A symbolic binding. No, Marenna said. A listening knot. The court went silent. Ilric's voice sharpened. Old wives' language. Old law, she corrected. A border vow cord listens until consent is spoken. After consent, it settles. Before consent, it should remain loose enough to be dropped. Corven looked at the first bride's white fingers. Those are not loose. No. Ilric stepped forward. Majesty, the cords are tightened by family attendants, not scribes. They show seriousness before fire. A vow cord tightened before refusal is heard does not show seriousness, Marenna said. It shows a door locked before the guest is asked to enter. One ash starling flew from the cage arch into the vow fire. The court flinched. The bird passed through gold flame and came out with a thread of burning light caught along its wing. It circled the first bride, then the second, then the third. Each time it passed over a wrist, the vow cord glowed dull amber. Not all. Some cords remained pale. 3 burned, then 5, then 7. A low sound moved through the border families. Corven saw the number before Marenna read it. How many? He asked. 7, Marenna said. Ilric said. 7 symbolic cords reacting to panic proves nothing. Marenna looked at the starlings. Then let them read sequence. The birds did not form words at once. They were small creatures, not royal scribes. They carried fragments. Rhythm, heat, echo. They remembered what was spoken near Dragonfire, not what men wished had been said cleanly. Marenna lifted her cut hand toward the vow fire. Cord laid. 7 starlings dipped low over 7 wrists. Release clause absent. A broken gold ring appeared above the scroll. Bride brought forward. The birds swept from the south column toward the fire. Cord tightened. The 7 amber cords flared. Consent word recorded. The white dragonhide scroll gleamed as if proud of itself. Refusal unheard. The vow fire dropped low. One of the 7 brides made a sound then. Small. Broken. A single breath shaped like a word she had never been allowed to finish. Ilric snapped. Silence in the rite. Corven turned on him. No. The word cracked through the hall. Not tenderness. Not justice yet. But interruption. Marenna looked at the bride. Do not force it. The birds already heard enough. The ash starlings gathered above the royal vow fire. Their wings beat in a dark circle, gold flame riding between them. A line formed slowly, as if the words had to fight through every layer of silk, ink, and fear placed over them. 7 border bride cords were tightened before consent was spoken. The south column went completely still. Ilric Mael's hand closed around his ivory quill. Corven looked from the burning wing letters to the 7 glowing cords. His voice did not soften. Who ordered those cords tightened before the vow fire heard refusal? The 7 cords glowed like small locked suns, not bright enough to light the hall, bright enough to shame it. At the south column, the 7 border brides stood with amber fire burning around their wrists, each cord tightened before the vow fire had heard refusal. Above the royal vow flame, ash starlings circled in dark, restless loops, their wings still carrying traces of gold. Torn black veil cloth hung from the aviary branches behind Marenna Dusk, like the remains of a lie that had failed to stay whole. Dragon King Corven Dravik looked at the glowing cords. Who ordered those cords tightened before the vow fire heard refusal? Vow scribe Ilric Mael bowed with grave patience. Majesty, cord handling belongs to family attendants. Scribes record vows. We do not tie silk. Marenna looked at him. No. You decide when tied silk becomes law. His eyes cooled. Aviary keepers should not lecture vow officers on binding procedure. Then vow officers should stop needing birds to remember what they cut away. A few starlings clicked sharply from the branches. Corven's gaze moved toward her. Not soft, not grateful, demanding. Explain the cords. Marenna did not move at once. Her palms still bled beneath the ash where the locking chain had burned her. The court had covered her birds, dismissed her warning, and listened only when fire rode above their heads. Now the Dragon King wanted explanation, because the harm had become visible. You ask because the cords glow, she said, not because their hands were white. Corven's jaw tightened. He did not apologize. Marenna was glad. An apology would have been too small for 7 women still bound. She stepped toward the first bride slowly, stopping far enough away not to make the woman feel cornered. May I look? The bride's lips parted. Ilric said, no one touches a live vow cord during rite inquiry. Corven's voice cut him down. She asked the bride. The hall went still. The bride swallowed and gave one tiny nod. Marenna knelt before her wrist without touching the cord. The silk was pale as milk, threaded with dragon gold. Beneath its beauty, the knot pulsed amber in a rhythm too controlled to be panic. A loose cord listens, Marenna said. A tightened cord records. Ilric smiled thinly. Then it recorded consent. No. Marenna looked up at him. It recorded pressure. The ash, starling on the cage arch, flew down and landed near the bride's sleeve. The woman flinched at first, then stilled when the small black bird only tapped the cord once. Then twice. A vow rhythm. Marenna read the pulse. Cord instruction. The knot glowed. Release clause absent. A broken gold ring appeared briefly over the vow scroll. Bride brought forward. The bird lifted one wing toward the fire. Cord settled. The knot tightened visibly. The bride gasped. Corven stepped forward. Marenna raised one hand. Do not cut it. His eyes flashed. Why? If you cut a live cord before the vow fire releases it, the scribe can claim the bride broke binding and owes penalty. The first bride closed her eyes. Corven looked at Ilric. Ilric's face remained composed. A standard protection against false refusals after lawful consent. Marenna stood slowly. A refusal after erased release law is not false. It is late, because someone locked the door. She moved to the vow table. Beside the white dragonhide scroll lay a narrow cord register bound in pale leather. Ilric's hand shifted toward it. Corven saw. Leave it, the Dragon King said. Ilric withdrew his hand. Marenna did not smile. She opened the register with her burned fingers. The pages were filled with neat instructions. House names, bride names, cord colors, witness timing, release listening, settlement marks. Some lines were perfect. Too perfect. She turned the register toward the royal vow fire. The birds cannot read all ink. They remember what was spoken near Dragonfire. But cord instructions are spoken when knots are prepared. Ilric said, "If you expect birds to testify against a register, Majesty, then Cindervale has truly fallen into superstition." Marenna looked at the starlings. Witness. The word was not command. It was permission. 3 ash starlings flew from the aviary, through the royal vow fire, and over the register. Their wings left small gold strokes above the page, not full sentences, only fragments. Loose until refusal. Loose until consent. Settle after answer. Then the fragments broke. A second set formed beneath them. Settle before flame. Rico silence escons. No delay after entry. The 7 chords pulsed amber in answer. The hall seemed to lose air. Corven stared at the register. Those instructions changed. Ilric bowed his head. Emergency tightening rules may be applied when border instability threatens the right. Marenna looked at the border brides. Did anyone tell them silence would count as consent once they entered the hall? None answered. Again, that silence carried more weight than screaming. Marenna turned one page. There, beneath the 7 bride names, a thin scrape ran across the old instruction line. The replacement had been written in a cleaner hand, darker ink, pressed hard enough to bruise the page. Ilric said, "Copyist correction." "No." Marenna touched the margin. "Scribe, cut pressure." The ash starlings circled lower. One by one, the 7 chords burned brighter. Not as punishment, as memory. Marenna read the sequence the birds carried between wing, knot, and fire. Release clauses cut from scroll. Chord instruction altered. 7 brides brought to the hall. Chords settled before refusal. Silence recorded as consent. Ilric's mouth tightened. No bride was forbidden to speak. Marenna looked at the first woman's white fingers. "No," she said. "They were only taught that speaking would not matter." The royal vow fire bent low, and the ash starlings swept through it in a black-gold spiral. Burning wing letters formed above the chord register. Chord instructions were altered, after release clauses were cut, and before the 7 brides entered the vow hall. Ilric Mael went very still. Corven looked from the altered register to the 7 glowing chords. His voice did not soften. Who changed silence into consent? The 7 chords answered, before Ilric Mael did. They pulsed once around the bride's wrists, amber and tight, as if the knots themselves remembered being taught to listen for silence instead of refusal. Above the royal vow fire, the ash starlings circled in black gold fragments, their wings dimming and brightening with every breath of flame. The torn veil still hung from the aviary like a shamed banner. Marenna Dusk stood beside the altered chord register with blood drying across her palms. Dragon King Corven Dravik looked at the glowing instructions. Who changed silence into consent? Ilric bowed. "No one changed consent, Majesty. The register clarifies procedure for unstable border rights. Silence has always held legal weight when a bride enters the vow hall willingly." One of the 7 brides flinched. Not much. Enough. Marenna saw it because she had spent her life watching small, frightened creatures survive by moving less. "Willingly," she said. Ilric turned toward her. They entered. They were brought under family witness. After their release clauses were cut. His smile thinned. "You keep returning to birds and old phrasing because you cannot disprove lawful attendance." Marenna looked toward the south column. "Attendance is not consent." A murmur moved through the court. Corven's eyes did not leave Ilric. Who issued the altered instruction? Ilric's hands remained folded around his ivory quill. The chord register is maintained by the vow office. Many clerks copy procedure. Marenna looked at the quill. It was too white, too clean. No ash, no ink stain, no sign that it had ever touched ugly work. "Then the birds should read the copy chain," she said. Ilric laughed softly. "Now, starlings are clerks?" "No," Marenna said. "They are witnesses you failed to bribe." The royal vow fire snapped high. Corven looked at her. Not softly, but the firelight caught something in his eyes now. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of a wound opening where certainty had been. "Read it," he said. Marenna did not move at once. The command still came from the same man who had kept the aviary covered. He wanted truth now, because truth had become dangerous to his right. "You ask because 7 cords glow," she said, "not because 7 women stood silent." His jaw tightened. He did not apologize. She would have hated him if he had tried. Marenna turned back to the register. Ash starlings cannot read every line. They remember what was spoken near Dragonfire, what was cut from vow, and what rhythm changed when law was prepared. She lifted one torn strip of black veil from the floor and laid it beside the cord register. A starling flew down. Then another. Their little claws touched the veil, then the altered page, then the air above the vow fire. Gold sparks gathered in uneven strokes. Ilric said, "Fabric and feathers do not establish office authority." Marenna ignored him. Old instruction. The first wing pattern appeared. Loose until refusal. Loose until consent. Settle after answer. She pointed to the altered line. New instruction. The birds swept lower. Settle before flame. Record silence as consent. No delay after entry. Then the starlings broke formation and scattered toward the vow dais. Marenna followed them with her eyes. They did not circle the family attendants. They did not circle the border fathers. They did not circle the priests holding witness lamps. They circled Ilric's ivory quill. The court saw it. Ilric's face did not change quickly enough. Marenna said, "Scribe rhythm." Ilric's voice cooled. Every official instruction carries scribe rhythm. Not every rhythm cuts release law first. Corven stepped closer to the vow dais. "Give me the quill." Ilric hesitated. Only once. Then he placed it on the black basalt table. Marenna did not touch it. She held one hand above it and let the nearest ash starling land on her wrist. Its claws were light. Its body trembled with vow fire memory. "Old release clause," she whispered. The bird opened its wings. A broken gold ring formed above the quill. Cut from scroll. The ring split. Chord instruction altered. The 7 chords pulsed amber. Silence recorded. The quill's ivory surface warmed. A thin black line appeared along its tip. Not ink. Burned vow, ash. Corven saw it. That quill cut the register. Ilric bowed his head. "My quill approves final copies. It does not mean I wrote every correction." Marenna turned to the border brides. "Did any clerk tell you silence would bind you?" No answer. Ilric's voice sharpened. "Do not pressure them." Marenna looked at him. "That is your work." One of the brides lifted her hand. The vow cord trembled around her wrist. She did not speak, but her fingers moved once toward the white dragonhide scroll, then toward the quill. The ash starlings rose in a sudden black wave. They flew through the royal vow fire and returned with burning fragments along their wings. Not full vows, not full names. A sequence. Release clauses cut. Quill correction entered. Chord instruction changed. Family attendants summoned after change. 7 brides brought under silence rule. Consent recorded. The court went so still that Marenna could hear the birds' small hearts beating when they passed near her face. Ilric spoke through his teeth. "A keeper's interpretation." "No," Marenna said. "A witness chain." The vow fire bent toward the ivory quill. The quill did not burn. It blackened from the inside, and one gold line wrote itself along the shaft before fading into ash. Scribe quill altered the cord register before family attendants were summoned. Ilric Mael's fingers twitched at his side. Corven looked from the blackened quill to the 7 glowing cords. His voice did not soften. What did the original release clauses allow them to refuse? The ash starlings did not answer with words first. They answered with silence. For one breath, every black-winged bird in the vow aviary of Cindervale landed. En branche, en cage arche. On the torn veil, on the black basalt rim around the royal vow fire. Hundreds of small bodies went still, each feather rimmed with fading gold from the flame they had passed through. The sudden quiet was worse than their flight. It made the hall feel as if the truth had drawn breath before striking. Dragon King Corven Dravik stood beside the blackened ivory quill. What did the original release clauses allow them to refuse? He asked. Vow scribe Ilric Mael bowed. Outdated obligations, Majesty. Rural phrasing, border anxieties. Nothing relevant to Crown Alliance law. Marenna Dusk looked at the 7 brides with glowing cords around their wrists. The answer is standing there, she said. Ilric's eyes sharpened. Careful, keeper. No, she said. That word belongs to people who hide knives inside clean scrolls. The royal vow fire snapped. Corven looked at Marenna. Read the clauses. She did not move quickly. He had covered the aviary. He had let Ilric call living witnesses ugly. He had listened only when black wings carried fire above his court. You ask what the clauses allowed because the quill burned, she said. Not because they were never shown. His jaw tightened. No apology came. That was better than a small one. Marenna turned to the birds. Old vow. A single ash starling lifted from the fire rim. Then another. Then 7. They flew low over the white dragonhide scroll, then over the 7 tightened cords. Their wings left fragments in the air, too brief for nobles to shape into comfort. Refuse. Release. No debt binding. No border bride by threat. No alliance by sealed silence. Ilric's voice cut through the room. Fragments, not law. Marenna looked at him. Fragments are what remain, after a scribe cuts the body apart. A border bride made a broken sound. The first bride, the one with bruised fingers, stared at the fire as if the missing words had reached into a locked room inside her chest. Her cord pulsed amber. The ash starling nearest her wrist opened both wings. A burning pattern formed above the cord. Marenna read it slowly. A bride may refuse if the vow was offered to settle family debt. The first bride closed her eyes. Another bird flew above the second cord. A bride may refuse if border soldiers were threatened in her name. The second bride's mouth trembled. A third bird crossed the fire. A bride may refuse if her consent was spoken by father, brother, lord, or house seal before her own voice reached the flame. The hall seemed to tilt. Ilric laughed once, too softly. No modern alliance could survive such looseness. Marenna turned on him. A vow that cannot survive a woman's answer was never an alliance. Corven's gaze moved over the south column. 7 women. 7 cords. 7 silences called consent because Ilric's quill had made silence useful. His expression hardened, but Marenna did not let his anger become the center. Not yet. Anger from a king could become theater if the harmed were still bound. Again, she whispered. The ash starlings rose in a black spiral. They passed through the royal vow fire and came out brighter, their wings etched with old law. The flame did not burn them. It remembered with them. Gold letters formed, broke, and reformed as if fighting through scraped dragonhide. No bride bound for passage tribute. No bride bound to secure garrison right. No bride bound where release words were withheld. Corven's face changed at the phrase, garrison right. Barely. Marenna saw it. So did Ilric. The vow scribe spoke quickly. Border garrison rights are military provisions. They do not concern bridal consent. One of the 7 brides whispered, They told my house the dragons would leave if I signed. The hall froze. Ilric turned toward her. Lady Vessa, do not confuse private family negotiation with vow law. Her name made the cord flare hotter. Vessa flinched, but did not lower her head this time. Marenna stepped between Ilric's voice and the bride's fear. Not close enough to touch the cord, close enough to make a boundary. She heard the word leave, Marenna said. The birds heard refuse. Ilric's face hardened. You will not turn one frightened girl into a legal collapse. Marenna's voice stayed low. You already turned 7 women into signatures. Corven looked at the vow scroll. Where is the garrison clause? Ilric bowed. Standard border protection language. Show it. The scribe hesitated. Only once. Corven's guards moved closer. Ilric unrolled the lower portion of the scroll. Beneath the house names, small ink lines, detailed passage rights, border towers, supply roads, flame beacon authority, and garrison hospitality. The words looked polite. That was the danger. Violence often entered law, wearing beautiful grammar. Marenna pointed to a blank space beside the garrison clause. There. Ilric said, There is nothing there. There should be refusal. The ash starlings answered. 7 birds swept down over the scroll. Their wings dragged golden fire across the blank margin. Scrape marks appeared, thin and cruel, where old words had been shaved away. Marenna read the sequence. Release clause spoken. Gold wings flashed. Garrison Rite added. The ink darkened. Bride, refusal, removed. The scrape marks burned. Chord instruction altered. 7 chords pulsed. Signatures taken. The scroll gleamed white. The birds climbed above the vow fire and gathered into one black circle, wingtip to wingtip. Burning letters filled the center. Original release clauses allowed border brides to refuse forced dragon alliance before flame binding. The first bride began to cry soundlessly. Ilric Mael's hand twitched toward the scroll. Corven looked from the burning law to the garrison clauses hidden beneath polite ink. His voice did not soften. Which bride tried to refuse before her signature was recorded? Lady Vessa stopped crying before anyone gave her permission to be heard. That was the first brave thing, not the words. The silence after tears. She stood beneath the south column with the other border brides, her pale veil trembling against her cheek, her vow cord burning amber around her wrist. Above the royal vow fire, the ash starlings held their black circle in the air, wingtip to wingtip, with old law still burning between them. Original release clauses allowed border brides to refuse forced dragon alliance before flame binding. Dragon King Corven Dravik looked toward the 7 glowing cords. Which bride tried to refuse before her signature was recorded? Ilric Mael bowed at once. Majesty, emotional distress during a rite is not legal refusal. Border daughters often weep before binding. It is expected. Marenna Dusk looked at him. You made grief sound procedural. His eyes cut toward her. The ash starling on the broken cage arch clicked once, then twice. A vow rhythm. Corven did not look away from the brides. Let them answer. Ilric's voice remained smooth. A live vow cord cannot be interrupted by post-binding confusion. If every bride may revise emotion after signature, no alliance can stand. A vow that fears a woman's answer deserves to fall, Marenna said. The court stirred. Corven turned his head slightly toward her. No tender, not forgiving, but no longer dismissing. Read who spoke, he said. Marenna's hands tightened at her sides. Blood had dried across her palms in thin dark lines from the locking chain. She did not move to the fire at once. You ask the birds now because their law burned brighter than his scroll, she said. Not because you saw her cord cutting into her skin. Corven's jaw hardened. No apology came. Good. Apologies could wait behind unbound wrists. Marenna stepped toward the south column. The birds cannot force speech. They can only carry what was spoken near dragonfire. Ilric folded his hands around the blackened ivory quill. And if no one spoke? Marenna looked at Vessa. The bride's fingers trembled once against the cord. The ash starlings saw. 7 birds broke from the circle and flew through the royal vow fire. They passed over each glowing cord, but only one bird landed on the basalt floor before Vessa. Its feathers smoked gold at the tips. Vessa stared at it as if a small, unwanted creature had done what no lord in her house had dared. It waited. Marenna did not touch her. Only if you choose, she said. Ilric's mouth tightened. Keeper, do not coach a bound bride. Corven's voice cut low. She said choose. Ilric fell silent. Vessa's lips parted. At first, no sound came. The cord around her wrist pulsed hotter, punishing the effort before the word could leave her. Marenna saw the pain cross her face. Do not fight the cord. Let the bird carry what it already heard. The starling opened one wing. Gold fire ran along the feathers. A small, broken word appeared above the bird. No. The hall stopped breathing. Ilric bowed his head as if disappointed by a child. A single sound cannot overturn a signed alliance. Marenna looked at the wing. It was not single. The bird lifted from the floor and flew toward the vow scroll. 3 more starlings joined it. Together they circled the lower margin where scrape marks still burned near the garrison clause. Marenna read the fragments as they formed. Release clause absent. The blank margin glowed. Cord tightened. Vessa's wrist flared amber. Bride brought forward. The bird swept from the south column to the fire. Refusal spoken. The word no appeared again, then again, each time fainter, as if someone had pressed it down under silk and ink. Ilric said sharply, Private breath. Marenna turned to him. Near dragonfire, breath becomes witness. Corven's eyes shifted to the vow scroll. What happened after she said it? The ash starlings circled lower. Marenna followed their pattern. House seal brought forward. A red gold mark appeared on the scroll beside Vessa's name. Father's hand over bride's wrist. Vessa closed her eyes. Consent line recorded. Black ink gleamed. Refusal buried under signature. The vow fire bent low, almost touching the bronze jaws that held it. Corven looked at Vessa. Is that true? Ilric stepped forward. Majesty, asking a bound bride to condemn her father in open court. Is that true? Corven repeated. Vessa's throat moved. Her cord tightened. She winced. Marenna lifted her burned hand before Corven could command again. The cord will hurt her if she answers against the recorded consent. Orin? No. Corven's eyes went to the cord. Something dangerous moved through his face. Then release the cord. Ilric snapped. It cannot be released until the rite concludes. Marenna looked at him. Because you altered the instruction. The ash starlings rose together, black bodies crossing through gold flame. Vessa's cord pulsed in time with their wings. The word no multiplied above the royal vow fire, not loud, not dramatic, but persistent enough to become law again. No before seal. No before signature. No before flame binding. Marenna read the sequence once more, each word sharper than the last. Vessa spoke refusal before her father's seal touched the scroll. The cord tightened after refusal. The signature was recorded after the refusal was buried. Vessa made a broken sound. Not denial. Recognition. The vow fire rose, and the starlings broke formation. Burning wing letters spread above the south column. Lady Vessa spoke refusal before her signature was recorded as consent. Ilric Mael's face became still in the wrong way. Corven looked from Vessa's burning cord to the blackened ivory quill. His voice did not soften. Who recorded her refusal as consent? Ilric Mael looked first at Vessa's father. Not at the scroll. Not at the burning word no, still trembling above the royal vow fire. At the father, Marenna Dusk saw it. So did the ash starlings. The old border lord standing behind the south column stiffened beneath his fur-lined mantle. His house seal hung at his throat, red gold and heavy, the kind of object men wore when they wanted daughters to remember which name had fed them. Dragon King Corven Dravik looked from Vessa's burning cord to the blackened ivory quill. Who recorded her refusal as consent? Ilric bowed. Her house witness confirmed the signature. Vessa's father lifted his chin. My daughter came willingly before the flame. The word willingly made Vessa's cord flare. She bit down on a cry. Marenna stepped half a pace forward before Corven did. Do not make her pain prove your sentence, she said. The border lord's face reddened. You speak above your station. No, Marenna said. Your station has been standing on her wrist. A low sound moved through the court. Corven did not silence it. Ilric raised one hand. Majesty, the matter is simple. Lady Vessa's father offered house witness. The vow scribe recorded consent as the law required. Marenna looked at the white dragonhide scroll. Then the law should not be afraid of birds. The ash starlings perched along the fire rim. Hundreds of black eyes watched the scroll. Ilric's jaw tightened. Corven's gaze moved to Marenna. Can they read the recording? They can read what was spoken near fire, she said. And what the fire heard after. He gave one small nod. Not permission as kindness. Permission because the court had already seen too much for him to bury. Marenna hated that it took fire in the air for him to listen. She turned to Vessa. You do not have to speak. Vessa's eyes filled again, but she held still. The ash starling before her lifted from the floor and flew through the royal vow fire. When it came out, its wings carried 3 faint marks, a broken no, a red seal, and a black line drawn across both. Marenna read carefully. Refusal spoken. The word no pulsed above the flame. House seal pressed. Vessa's father's seal glowed red gold. Consent line opened. The white dragonhide scroll shone along Vessa's name. Ilric said, Exactly. Consent was lawfully entered under house witness. Marenna did not look away from the bird. Not finished. The starling dove again. This time 7 others followed it, circling the ivory quill where it lay blackened on the basalt table. Their wings did not form a full sentence at once. They struck rhythm first. Tab, Tap. Scrape. Marenna's stomach tightened. Quill cut, she said. Ilric's eyes sharpened. A scribe's quill must shape legal phrasing. No, it cut across refusal. The ivory quill warmed. A thin gold line appeared along its blackened tip. Then a smaller line beneath it, red and nearly invisible, like a word buried under blood. Corven stepped closer. What is that? Marenna looked at the birds. The refusal mark. Ilric spoke too quickly. There is no formal refusal mark on the scroll. There was. The royal vow fire bent toward the quill. The dragonhide scroll curled at one lower edge. Beneath Vessa's clean consent line, faint ash letters rose through the white surface. No, not written beautifully, not written with official grace. A small mark, pressed hard, then scraped nearly away. Vessa made a broken sound. Her father said, she was frightened. I steadied her hand. The cord around her wrist burned brighter. Marenna looked at him. You held it down. The ash starlings flew in a low circle around Vessa's wrist, her father's seal, the ivory quill, and the scroll. Gold fire linked the 4 points. They did not accuse by emotion. They carried sequence. Marenna read it. Vessa refused before the flame. Her father's seal pressed over her hand. Ilric's quill opened the consent line. The refusal mark was cut. Consent was recorded after the cut. Ilric's face became smooth again. Too smooth. You cannot distinguish my hand from office practice. Marenna lifted the torn black veil strip from the floor and held it near the quill. A tiny ash starling landed on her wrist, its claws gentle against burned skin. Ilric male, she said. The bird opened its wings. The quill answered, not with flame, with sound. A faint scratch moved through the hall, dry and cruel, the sound of ivory scraping dragonhide. Then Ilric's own voice emerged from the memory of the vow fire, thin but unmistakable. Record consent. The house has answered. The court froze. Vessa's father went pale. Ilric did not move. For the first time, he looked less like a scribe and more like a man standing too near the fire he had trusted to obey him. Corven's face hardened into something colder than anger. Marenna kept her eyes on the birds. The starlings do not remember thought. They remember what was spoken near dragonfire. The starling on her wrist shook once, then lifted into the air. Above the royal vow fire, burning wing letters formed slowly, each word cut sharp against gold flame. Ilric Male recorded Vessa's refusal as consent after her father's seal was pressed. Vessa's cord loosened one breath. Only one. Enough for her to sob. Not loudly. Freely. Corven looked from the loosened cord to the 6 still burning at the south column. His voice did not soften. How many refusals did your quill bury? The blackened ivory quill lay on the basalt table like a small white bone pulled from a grave. For one breath, no one in the vow hall moved. Vessa's cord had loosened only slightly, but that small space between silk and skin changed the air around her. She could breathe without the knot answering first. She held her wrist against her chest as if freedom, even partial freedom, might be taken back if she looked at it too directly. Dragon King Corven Dravik stood before the royal vow fire with his face carved into iron. How many refusals did your quill bury? He asked. Ilric Male bowed. Too slowly. Majesty, one distressed bride does not prove a pattern. Marenna Dusk looked up at the ash starlings perched along the aviary branches, the torn black veil, the bronze dragon jaws around the fire. Their small bodies were trembling now. They had flown through vow fire too many times in too short a span. Living witnesses were not tools that could be used endlessly without cost. Corven looked at her. Can they read the rest? She hated that he asked, as if the birds owed the court more pain. They can carry what they remember, she said. They cannot survive being forced through flame because men prefer proof after harm. His jaw tightened. No apology. Still not enough. But his eyes moved to the birds, and for the first time, not as omens, not as evidence, but as living things. Then only what is needed, he said. Marenna did not thank him. She stepped toward the south column. No bride will be made to speak. Ilric's voice cooled. Convenient. Silent accusations require no witness courage. Marenna turned on him. You are the one who made silence legal. The vow fire cracked. 6 cords still burned tight around 6 wrists. Vessa's remained amber but looser, as if the first buried refusal had opened a small wound in the binding law. The remaining brides stood pale and still, each one watching the birds with terror and hope fighting in the same breath. Marenna lifted the torn veil strip. Witness only what was spoken near Dragonfire. The ash starlings rose. Not all of them. 12. 2 for each remaining cord. They flew low, not through the heart of the fire this time, but along its edge, where gold heat licked their feathers and painted their wings with thin, burning strokes. The hall filled with the sound of small wings and smaller memories. The first pair circled a bride with a blue cord. A word appeared above her wrist. No. A second pair circled a bride with a white gold cord. No. Another. No. One by one, 6 small refusals appeared in the air, each shaped differently because each woman had spoken with a different kind of fear. One was sharp, one was barely breath, one broke halfway, one came with a sob, one was whispered into a sleeve. One was spoken after a father's seal had already been lifted, too late for ink but not too late for fire. Ilric said, "Fragments again." Marina looked at the 6 burning words. A buried no is still whole enough to shame the hand that buried it. The ash starlings dipped toward the vow scroll. Their wings carried sequence. Marenna read because no one else would do it gently. Refusal spoken. The 6 words burned. House seal pressed. 6 seals glowed along the lower margin. Scribe line opened. The blackened quill warmed. Consent entered. The scroll shone white. Refusal scraped. Gray ash lifted from the dragon hide. Cord settled. The 6 cords tightened so sharply that several brides gasped. Corven moved forward. Marenna raised one hand. "Do not cut them." His eyes flashed with fury. "They are hurting. They were made to punish truth. Cutting them gives Ilric penalty law." Ilric seized on it. "Correct. A bride who breaks binding after consent places her house in debt to the crown." Marenna stared at him. "And there is the cage." The court understood slowly. Then, all at once, the vows had not merely forced the women into alliances, they had built penalties around escape. If a bride resisted after her refusal had been erased, her house would owe debt, soldiers, land, roads, fire rights. Every path away had been turned into punishment. Corven looked at the scroll. "Show the penalty clause." Ilric's mouth tightened. "Standard enforcement." "Show it." The vow scribe unrolled the bottom edge of the dragon hide. There, beneath elegant language about unity and border peace, lay the penalty terms. Unpaid tribute doubled, garrison passage extended, dragon road access granted, border flame towers surrendered until debt settled. Marenna's stomach went cold. The brides had not been the only prize. They had been keys. She whispered, "This was never only about marriage." Ilric's eyes flicked toward her. Too late. The ash starlings saw. They swept down over the penalty clause, black wings flashing gold. Their fragments connected the buried refusals to the debt terms beneath them. Refusal erased. Consent recorded. Escape punished. House debt triggered. Garrison rights extended. Border towers opened. Corven's face changed at the last words. Note shock. Recognition. A ruler, seeing the machine inside the ceremony. "Ilric," he said softly. The vow scribe bowed. "Majesty, securing garrison rights through alliance law has kept Cindervale stable for generations." "Through consent," Corven said. Ilric's eyes did not lower. "Through order." Marenna looked at the 7 brides. Order that needed their no removed. The royal vow fire rose high, and the ash starlings flew through it one final time for this sequence. Their bodies came out smoking, but their wings held. Burning letters spread above the vow scroll, larger than before. 7 refusals were buried as consent to trigger penalty debts and open border garrison rights. A cry moved through the border houses. Not one voice. Many. Corven looked from the burning law to the penalty clauses, then to the 7 women whose cords still held them. His voice did not soften. "What border power did you buy with their silence?" Ilric Mael looked at the 7 glowing cords as if they were poorly behaved ink. Not women. Not vows. Not lives nearly sealed into debt. Ink. That was what made Marenna Dusk hate him most in that moment. The royal vow fire burned high in the bronze dragon jaws, and above it the ash starlings circled weakly, black wings edged with gold. They had carried too many erased words through flame. Some landed heavily on the torn veil. Some tucked their heads beneath their wings. One small bird dropped onto the basalt rim and trembled until Marenna reached out and let it lean against her burned finger. Dragon King Corven Dravik stood before the exposed penalty clauses, his face cold enough to make the hall forget the fire. Ilric bowed. Majesty, border power is not bought. It is secured. Cindervale cannot hold mountain roads, flame towers, and treaty gates by sentiment. These alliances made the border obedient. Marenna looked at the 7 women. No, they made obedience look like marriage. The first bride, Vessa, held her loosened cord close to her chest. The other 6 still stood bound, their wrists marked amber, their faces pale beneath veils that had never hidden anything from the birds. Corvin's voice did not soften. Which border power? Ilric's eyes flicked to the bottom of the scroll. Marenna saw it. So did the ash starlings. The birds rose again, though several struggled to keep formation. Marenna's heart tightened. No, she said. The hall turned toward her. She stepped between the vow fire and the aviary. They have carried enough. Ilric smiled faintly. How convenient. The living witnesses grow tired before the final accusation. Marenna turned on him. Because they are living. The words struck the hall harder than she expected. Living. Not tools. Not omens. Not decorations under black cloth. Corven looked at the exhausted starlings, then at Marenna's burned hands. For once, he did not command her to explain. What do you require? He asked. She did not let the question soften her. You release the cords first. Ilric snapped. Impossible. If the cords are released before the rite concludes, the border houses may claim breach against the crown. Marenna looked at Corven. That is why he left them burning. Corvin's eyes went to the 7 cords. Ilric stepped closer. Majesty, if you sever live vow cords under accusation from birds, every scribe in Cindervale will lose authority. No, Marenna said. Only the ones who needed silence more than truth. Corven lifted his scarred hand toward the vow fire. The flame bent low, not obediently. Wariness in fire had a shape, and Marenna had learned to read small things that powerful men ignored. Can they be released without penalty? Corven asked. Marenna looked at the old perch, where the first bird had tapped the vow rhythm. If the release clauses are restored before the cords are opened. Ilric went still. There, the last locked door. Marenna picked up the scraped lower margin of the dragonhide scroll. The original clauses did not only allow refusal, they named what happened after refusal. Safe return, no house debt, no garrison claim, no penalty bride, price. The ash starlings lifted one by one. Not all. Enough. They did not fly through the heart of the fire this time. They skimmed the edge, carrying old vow fragments in small gold sparks. Safe return. No debt. No road surrender. No flame tower transfer. No bride price in soldiers. No silence as treaty. The penalty clauses on the scroll began to smoke. Ilric lunged toward the dragonhide. Corvin's guard caught him before his hand touched it. The ivory quill rolled from the basalt table and struck the floor. The ash starling's dove. Every black wing crossed the royal vow fire in a single dark wave, and the fire answered not with a sentence at first, but with a map. Gold lines spread above the hall. Border roads, mountain gates, flame towers, garrison paths, river crossings, and 7 marriage routes drawn like chains across living land. Each route began at a bride's name and ended at a military mark. The court saw the machine. 7 refusals buried. 7 consents forged. 7 penalty debts prepared. 7 border passages opened. Marenna read the final sequence because her voice was the only one steady enough. Release clauses removed, refusals buried, consent recorded, penalty debts prepared, garrison rights extended, flame towers transferred under bridal breach. The map burned brighter. Then the ash starlings formed the last line above the vow fire. Ilric Mael used buried refusals to seize border roads, flame towers, and garrison rights through forced vow debt. The vow hall broke. Border lords shouted. Priests stumbled back from the fire. One bride tore at her veil, not her cord. Only the veil, as if she needed one useless thing removed before law could catch up. Ilric's face twisted for the first time. I preserved Cindervale. Marenna looked at him. You fed it women and called the cage a border. Corven did not speak for several breaths. When he did, the entire hall lowered around his voice. Restore the release clauses. Ilric laughed once. Without scribes, Majesty? Corven looked toward the aviary. Not at Ilric. At Marenna. She understood the cost in that look. Not romance, not trust, responsibility. She walked to the torn veil and opened the last covered cage herself. The smallest starlings blinked into the firelight, soot dark and frightened. Free first, she said. Corven heard. Everyone did. No vow would be read, while witnesses remained caged. The attendants looked to the king. Corven's answer came without softness. Open every door. The aviary doors were unlatched. Black wings filled the hall, not frantic now, but wide and circling. The birds flew above the border brides, above the old scroll, above the royal vow fire that had nearly been used to trap them all. Marenna lifted the scraped dragon hide. Release restored, she said. The starlings answered with gold sparks. 7 cords loosened at once. Not cut, released. The brides gasped as silk fell from their wrists and landed on the basalt floor like dead snakes. Vessa stepped back from the south column. Another bride began to cry openly. A third whispered no again, not because she had to prove it, but because the word finally belonged to her. The royal vow fire lowered. The false penalty clauses turned black and flaked from the scroll. Corven faced the court. From this day forward, no vow in Cindervale stands by scribe record alone. Living witness creatures recognized under old vow law will be heard before royal fire. No release clause may be removed from border vow law. No cord may tighten before refusal is heard. No silence may be recorded as consent. Ilric struggled against the guards. You will let birds rule law? Corven looked at Marenna. Then at the ash starlings resting on her shoulders, her arms, the torn cage arch. No, he said. I will stop letting scribes murder it. The court went silent. Marenna did not bow. She only looked at the freed birds and the 7 women standing without cords. Corven came to stand before her, close enough for the vow fire to gild the scar along his jaw. You trusted birds over me, he said. His voice was lower now, but not soft enough to erase what had happened. Marenna met his eyes. The birds never edited the truth. The answer struck him. Good. Let it. Above them, the ash starlings settled across the open aviary, black wings no longer hidden. The vow fire burned steady beneath them, smaller now, cleaner. It did not crown Marenna. It did not bless Corven. It did not turn covered wings into romance because a king had finally listened. It simply held the restored vow law in its flame, while the living witnesses breathed freely above it.